Good morning. My name is Leslie Ellen Blood. I am the Director for Graduate Community and Program Development here at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit today about how to make the transition from student to scholar. So a big part of what we're trying to address at CU is how we can create accountability programs that will help students as they somehow end up in situations where they had less management than they had before. Because graduate school is relatively unstructured, we really need to be teaching you guys time management skills and also how you can create the perfect accountability program for yourself based on personality. So what does accountability mean? Well, we want to protect ourselves from decision-making fatigue. Take a good look at the energy budget, and you want to try and reserve as much as possible for important decisions that you have to make during graduate school. And also, we very much focus on how to play the long game so that students understand that short-term sacrifices, if it's getting you what you want long-term, which is generally, your master's or your PhD degree, then it's somehow worth it. So some different things that we talk quite a bit about in seminar is this idea of eat the frog. Starting your morning off when you have the most emotional energy budget to just do the thing that you've been dreading the most. Also focusing on the long-term plan. Understanding that graduate school is not going to be easy and you are going to have to make sacrifices along the way. The other piece that's also very important is understanding how habits can lead to a little bit more grit, help with your self-discipline, at the same time understanding that willpower and discipline will only get you so far, but habits are sort of the safety net that students can rely on during difficult times. Finally, another piece that we talked quite a bit about in our accountability seminars is how to frame your goals around what you value and how to create habit structures that then support those goals. So with the habit goals and the values piece, what we're really trying to do over time is make sure that your goals are appropriate for where you want your life to go. So we focus quite a bit on how to frame them properly. We talk a lot about how habits over time can increase your resilience and decrease your overall resistance to have to performing tasks that maybe you're not in the mood to do, such as writing your dissertation. And finally, what we have found is that accountability seminars do improve graduate student mental health because they break down isolation factors and also help students integrate behaviors and habits which make them feel really happy and proud of their progress. So here's just a little bit of information I found about mental health at UC Berkeley, and I've used quite a bit of this information in framing some of the programs that we offer here at CU. If isolating factors are a common trigger for depression and anxiety among graduate students, what can we possibly do to address that? Well, this also comes back to the idea in graduate school that we want to focus on diversity and inclusion. We can't do that unless we're actually paying attention to graduate student mental health. And part of our accountability program is meant to decrease the isolation that many students feel and sort of level the playing field as they move their way through graduate school. So here are just some common topics. Pre and procrastination. So precrastination is being busy for the sake of being busy. And the way that I like to teach this to my students is if you are trying to write your dissertation or work at home and you notice that the toilet needs to be scrubbed, you would rather do anything, including scrub the toilet, than sit down and write the dissertation. And a big part of precrastination is connected to vulnerability. And what that means is that writing is generally a very vulnerable task. And for many students, they're wildly uncomfortable sitting down and putting their original research onto paper. But if we can focus on that whole eat the frog piece and framing, the goal of writing the dissertation around lifestyle values that they hold, it tends to get a little bit easier. Procrastination, on the other hand, is putting off a task that we know needs to be done. So now we come back to eat the frog. And if over time you learn, hey, I can do hard things, I can eat this frog, I can get stuff done, over time you procrastinate less and less because you've built up a nice strong base of trust within yourself. Another piece that we focus quite a bit on is what can we automate from every day? What decisions can we remove from the realm of what you need to deal with every single day? So the examples I give my students is I wear the same clothes all the time. My hair is always the same, makeup's the same. Everything is the same because then I never, ever, ever have to think about it. I also eat the same things a lot because I don't want to waste any of my mental energy making decisions on things that aren't truly important for what I'm trying to get done in the day. When we manage to automate a lot of habits and behaviors, that actually leads to a much more comfortable existence because you have greater energy bandwidth to spend on things that truly do matter. Predictability and productivity. We want to make your days as predictable as possible, and we want to plan. For many of my students, the whole idea of planning your day out, including breaks and including free time, is key to productivity. This also gives you an idea of when the task will be finished and when you can relax. There need to be daily end goals, and that's that piece of order and relaxation. When everything's falling into place and you know when your day ends and you know when you get a break, then really truly enjoy that. Don't feel guilty for taking a little bit of time off every day, because during that time you're regenerating, and you can't be brilliant and you can't be creative and you can't contribute things that are meaningful when you're constantly overwhelmed and in a state of playing catch up because you've procrastinated or precrastinated yourself into a very bad position. Having something to look forward to, celebrating small successes, comprehensive exams, writing up your proposal, finishing coursework, whatever the case might be, find milestones and celebrate them. Trust and happiness. The more that we practice performing behaviors over time, the greater trust we have in our ability to do those things. And when you have more trust in yourself, I think it generally creates a much happier dynamic with where you are at any given moment. And last but not least, we definitely want to avoid isolation. And at CU Boulder, one of our big pieces to address this is seminars and write-ins and workshops. So attend and meet people who are in similar situations to you and really learn that, graduate school, even though it can feel very isolating, there are a lot of spaces that are quite communal as well. So here are some different things that we have here. We have the advising agreement. Drafted, we're piloting it right now, but what it does is it helps facilitate the conversations between students and advisors. For many personality types, having an accountability partner is key, so somebody that you share your goals with and you check in with daily. Writing retreats, which we bookend every semester, including the summer with those. Support groups, that's how I think of seminar in many ways. We're all sort of going through the same thing, we're all learning the same skills. Group therapy, we have a number of resources on campus that many of my students take part in. Working in a public space. This seems sort of like a gimme, but you'd be surprised how much more productive you're going to be outside of your home. Finding multiple mentors outside of just your advisor. Your advisor is definitely a research mentor, but finding somebody in the personal and professional realm might be helpful as well. Once again, celebrating milestones, so including your friends, maybe from seminar, in some of these activities as you move through the program and you have small wins. And finally, I really encourage my students to find another graduate student to mentor, because not only are you decreasing the amount of isolation you feel, but you're also decreasing the amount of isolation your student mentee would feel. So as far as the dissertation is concerned, the hardest part of writing is restarting. And so a big focus that we have in seminar is how to build in really good habit systems so you're doing some kind of writing every day. Also, I like all of my students to leave notes for themselves whenever they take a break for the day or they're done for the day on where they were hoping to go next, because we don't want to waste valuable, productive time getting caught up and having to reread and then start editing and waste a bunch of time, because what we really need to do is just get a draft of the dissertation. So, time management is key. I like my students to work roughly 4-hour productivity blocks, and there are a number of different ways you can measure that time depending on what you're hoping to accomplish. I'm the type of person that doesn't really enjoy breaks. I like to just front load the whole 4 hours and then be done with it. But many of my students really enjoy the 2 and 2. So they work 2 hours in the morning on the dissertation, take a break for lunch, and 2 hours in the afternoon. If you like to work in shorter bouts, the Pomodoros are really great. That's 25 minutes on and 5 minutes off versus the 50-10s, which some of my students also enjoy, which is a 50-minute writing period and a 10-minute break. And the key with the breaks is you want to be taking them away from your desk, preferably outside, and definitely not in front of a screen. So building really good writing habits day after day after day allows for more creativity and a greater sense of balance as you're moving through the dissertation process. Also understanding why you're procrastinating on the writing is really a key piece. So procrastination is not because you're lazy. Procrastination happens because there's an emotional blockage to the material that you're hoping to sit down and put out on paper. Writing is a really vulnerable exercise. It's a very vulnerable activity, and we're risking a lot, and it feels very high stakes to be writing this dissertation, and that could very well be the reason that you are procrastinating. Finally, creating a clear finish line for every single activity all the time during your day. You want to know when it's going to be over so that you can take a break and really celebrate those downtimes. So the way that I explain habit formation to my students is picture your brain is full of hiking trails. We've all been out there bushwhacking our way through some of them, and we've also traveled other hiking trails that are practically paved roads. So what we want to do with habits is we want to pave the good roads, and we want to let the brush go ahead and overtake the habits that we're trying to eliminate from our lives. So good habits certainly make graduate school significantly less stressful for students, and constantly making decisions throughout the day takes a great amount of emotional energy. So for me, for example, I tell my students that I don't make any good decisions in the afternoons. So after 3 p.m., I try to not make any at all if possible. I like to front load all the tough stuff during the day. I also want my students to really focus on habit formation, because if you take a look at something like writing, if you do it a little bit every day over time, your resistance to performing the behavior is decreased and your resilience is increasing, and those behaviors which you have automated are now not as emotionally expensive for you. So, how long does it take to build habits? Well, we're looking at best around 90 days to lower our resistance to performing a new behavior. So I encourage my students to track those habits. There are online trackers. Way of Life is a really nice one, or there are planners where you can track your habits, and I really like the Clever Fox planner for that. And then last but not least, really celebrating when you are successful during the day in building these new habits, because we want new behaviors that we are trying to adopt to be connected to positive emotion. So here are just some general things of what we're talking about in seminar right now: time management habits, habit pairing, which is when you pair, for example, I never ever watch Netflix unless I'm on the treadmill. That is a habit pairing. It pairs something that I may be challenged in doing, which is running on the treadmill, with an activity that I truly enjoy, which is watching Netflix. And that makes me less resistant to performing those behaviors. Habit triggers and the bookending techniques, paying very close attention to what motivating factors get you in the mood for performing behaviors. We want to trigger good habits. Now, habit triggers, we can look at those a number of different ways. So if you are trying to get yourself in the mood to write your dissertation, if you have a good habit pairing, which maybe is a special latte when you're sitting down and writing, and a habit trigger could be something like meditating beforehand or having done your run before you're writing, but some type of schedule that you are sticking to every day, the habit that you perform prior to the task you're hoping to do well on, maybe writing or running, whatever the case might be, you want to sort of pave those roads and create an environment where your brain knows what's coming next. So that way, sitting down to write, once again, no resistance, because over time you've learned that, okay, this is just what's coming after this habit. So it's about layering them together. And finally, I like to talk quite a bit about habit formation in your personality. Some people, it's easier for them to adopt habits than others. And some of my students feel greatly challenged and constrained with all of these structures. So for those students, for example, my students who do feel a lot of constraint, we may try to adopt fewer habits and focus more on the impact of the ones that we are adopting. And then my students who really enjoy the habit piece and who are very reliant on the triggers and the pairings, is they're going to have more stuff that they're trying to layer and then take action on. So I really like Gretchen Rubin's 4-tendency book. I have all of my students take the 4-tendency quiz. The different tendencies are rebel, obliger, questioner, and upholder. And rebels tend to resist inner and outer expectations, which can be challenging from an accountability perspective. And we very much have to operate on the illusion of freedom for those students. We want to give them as much freedom as possible and allow them to work on inspiration. Obligers, on the other hand, really enjoy external accountability, and they thrive in those environments. So for most of my obligers, as soon as we put things on an external calendar and we sort of have them verbalize their goals and we create an accountability partner, problems are generally solved. Questioners, on the other hand, and most academics in my experience are questioners, will only perform a task if it makes sense to do it. So we have to spend a lot of energy rationalizing why we're doing the behavior that we're doing. So Gretchen Rubin calls that the strategy of clarity. And finally, the upholders respond very well to internal and external accountability structures. But the challenge with being an upholder, and I am one, is that we're not very flexible thinkers. And so changes in plans or shifts in schedules can be very destabilizing to us. And let's face it, graduate school is full of unexpected surprises. I also use the Enneagram for many of my students. So the Enneagram deals with motivation, like motivating factors. How do I trigger you into wanting to do a thing? Well, I need to find out what's going to be motivating for you. So I'm a type 3 on the Enneagram, which makes me an achiever, and I'm very motivated by other people's perceptions of the work that I do. And I cringe every time I have to say that, but man, is it true. So for me to feel motivated, I have to force myself to present my work in a public forum or in a place where I'm going to get feedback, because I'm more likely to be productive when that's the dynamic. We also talk quite a bit about, desires and fears. Levels of development have a lot to do on the Enneagram with health. Where are you in a mental space? Are you feeling really great? Are you really struggling right now? And then finally, they have a lot of growth recommendations, like behaviors you can work on, things you can adopt that will help you long term. So how do I put all this together? Well, here are just some common strategies that we talk quite a bit about in seminar. And once again, this is from Gretchen Rubin's 4-tendency book. Distinctions, so why is something different? Monitoring, we can't know how to improve unless we're collecting data on ourselves. A nice strong foundation, why am I doing what I'm doing? Scheduling, I really believe in this one. I try to schedule as much as possible, because if something is not on my schedule, I may not do it. Accountability, what structure is best? The clean slate. So if you're a person who loves New Year's Day, or if you're a person who loves Mondays or the first of the month to start new habits, you might be a clean slate kind of person. Lightning bolt, when a whole life event triggers a series of changes, and it may make it possible for you to adopt behaviors or habits that would otherwise be difficult for you to adopt. Abstaining and moderating, this is one of my favorite ones because I'm definitely an abstainer. I find that I have a very addictive personality, and so I have to be extremely mindful of behaviors that I want to bring into my life, because if it's something that I enjoy, the chances of me continuing to do it over and over and over and over and over again is pretty high. Moderators can enjoy a little bit, like if you're a person who can eat 2 Oreos, congratulations, I can't relate. Convenience and inconvenience. So we want to make behaviors that we want to adopt as convenient as possible, and to make behaviors that we are trying to quit as inconvenient as possible. Loophole spotting. These are the lies that we tell ourselves in moments of maybe when productivity is not at an all-time high. We're looking for reasons why. We're like, oh, well, I worked so hard last week, so I'm going to take today off. Or, the reason that X happened was because Y happened to me yesterday. And so in that case, I'm just going to take it easy on myself. And maybe today's going to be a wash. But you always need to look for these loopholes. And questioners, I have found, are the ones who find loopholes the best. Distractions. How are you using technology? This is a big piece in seminar. Step away from your phone. We waste a lot of time popping in and out of tasks because technology is very distracting. Rewards, if you are the kind of person who enjoys treats and rewards, especially if you're an obliger, have an external person involved in rewarding you. Pairing, I discussed earlier. I think pairing for upholders and obligers is sort of key. Clarity, we want to know why we're doing what we're doing. Identity, who are you and what does this get you long term? What do you value? And finally, other people. So looking at other people's behaviors and either leveraging the group mentality or leveraging the idea of how am I different? So a lot of Rebels, the strategy of other people is focusing on how they are different than other people. And what they have to offer is the strategy of identity, like clarity of identity. Also remember that motivation and willpower are not dependable, and there are some different ways that we can trigger motivation. Mantras. So a lot of my students do some mantra work over the course of 1 month. We also create vision boards or have other triggers into behaviors. Habits. We focus a lot on building and keeping good habits. And mediation. If you ever need to just sit down and kind of work through whatever issues you're having, we have platforms for that as well. So here's a little bit more on the 4-hour productivity block. You can measure with Pomodoros. Once again, that's the 25-5. The overwhelmed 15 is something I recommend to my students when they really don't want to perform a task. So if writing your dissertation is one of those things, just focus on 15 minutes minimum a day. The 2-2 split, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. Solid 4, which is my favorite, which is just grind it out. 50-10, 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off, or 3-1, or the front load. So doing the majority of the work in the morning and then just 1 hour in the afternoon. So how do we know if we're doing a good job? Well, we've got to measure progress. And one thing that I try to teach my students is that task-oriented goals are generally a mistake because you only have control over so much. However, you do have quite a bit of time, or you have quite a bit of control over time, and you also have quite a bit of control over word count goals. So task goals like finish chapter 2, well, that's not going to happen if the supercomputer crashes and you still have to process a lot of data. However, if you have a time goal, like I'm going to work on this, 2 hours, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you do have control over that contribution to your goal. So focus on building goals around things that you can control. Now it's time to get to work. I like my students to write every day, even a tiny bit on the weekend, in a journal or in their planner, but just to get in the habit of putting words on paper every single day. Tracking your progress. If you have a good day, figure out what made it good. Examine your habits and experiment with different triggers, maybe different pairings, but there are a whole bunch of different ways that you can make habits more enjoyable and more easily accessible. Treats and rewards, only for certain personalities does this work, but maybe try to leverage those if you are the kind of person who enjoys them. And then internal check-ins, like figuring out, how am I feeling today? And where's the energy budget? And how do I want to spend it? That is key. Last but not least, finding writing support. Well, we have a lot on this campus. We have seminars, we have write-ins, we have edits that you can schedule with the Writing Center. In our accountability seminars, we have accountability partners, looking into more than one mentor. And finally, you can request more services from your institution. So if you find these helpful, let us know, and we can build our program even more. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it, and have a wonderful day.